If we go through the realist perspective, I'm curious. If NATO membership was never floated directly on the table to Ukraine, would not Ukraine fall victim to Russia's sphere of influence anyway? Isn't that what realism would tell us? That irrespective of NATO expansion, we would expect a country to exercise authority, if it can, onto weaker powers surrounding their borders, meaning that none of this NATO shit even really matters anyway to Russia?
Well, that's really the crux of it, isn't it? Yes.
It kind of is, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Wait. Let me go back a second. I was kind of reading something.
Security.
No
one's listening to that.
If we go through the realist perspective, I'm curious. If NATO membership was never floated directly on the table to Ukraine, would not Ukraine fall victim to Russia's sphere of influence anyway? Isn't that what realism would tell us? That irrespective of NATO expansion, we would expect a country to exercise authority, if it can, onto weaker powers surrounding their borders, meaning that none of this NATO shit even really matters anyway to Russia?
Well, that's really the crux of it, isn't it? Yes.
It kind of is, right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, but here.
Yeah, KO'd.
Oh man.
Well, the important thing though is if you don't have NATO involved, how are you going to say America bad? Come on, Destiny. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. How's it America's fault if NATO's not involved? Come on. What are we talking about?
There's a causal chain here, Destiny. Please, America bad. Shut up.
That was the KO punch, I think, in this situation. But
yeah.
Here. Yes, Russia would exert influence over Ukraine, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So then why talk about all the NATO bullshit, right? Obviously, they're going to do it anyway. And even security in the Black Sea, does it really matter if they have access to the Black Sea? They're not getting to the Mediterranean through fucking Turkey anyway, right? Where there are also like nuclear missiles as well. Like, it seems like all of the NATO shit is just like a smokescreen anyway, right?
No, but it's not then. It's not. That's exactly the point is, you're saying like, oh, well, Ukraine would just be a buffer state. It's like, yeah, exactly. Ukraine should. NATO membership makes it a pro-Western country. Yes, it should, because
but he kind of unfortunately let himself get pulled off that point because he conceded it wouldn't be a buffer state. It would just be a Russian vassal state, regardless of whether NATO was involved or not. According to realism, anyway, that's what realism would say. Larger world powers, force smaller countries to do their bidding, basically.
All of these places were buffer states. That's a whole concept behind the Iron Curtain.
Right.
The worst case scenario of Ukraine being a buffer state is that Russia will influence it.
Did I say buffer state? I meant vassal state. I meant pawns of Russia.
Right.
Yeah. Not buffer states. They were basically all run by Moscow.
Right. Well, and he's also downplaying it because he says the worst thing that'll happen to Ukraine is that they're influenced by Russia. It's like, oh, but what does that mean though? Does that mean that Ukraine is doomed to have, a floundering economy that's mired in corruption? Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's what just ticks me off. Because you're dooming the entire population of Ukraine to this fucking nihilistic, corrupt future for basically not even pinned to their own dictatorship, but pinned to the dictatorship next door. It's like, how fucked is that? We get pissed off that our elites steal from us. Imagine if the elites next door, the fucking Mexican elites, were stealing from us, not our elites.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. People be losing their fucking minds. Rightfully so.
Yeah. Insane. Yeah. But we're just supposed to sit here and, that's another thing that bugs me, because even it seems like people are saying to us, even empathizing with the Ukrainian people is just wrong. Why?
Yeah, well, it depends on who you're talking to, but yeah, sure.
Why? We have no right to empathize with them because America bad, and America is to blame. You caused all of this. How dare you empathize with them? This is your fault. Right. I guess it's like saying, you're the one that caused the car accident. What are you talking about? It's like, wait a second here. Right. I was walking down the street minding my own business.
I wasn't even in a car.
I know. No, here's NATO. You were in the NATO car.
Who cares? Yes.
People of Ukraine care, obviously.
Powerful states influence weaker states. This is how states behave. And that is...
This is not how all states behave. That's not true.
That is how great powers behave.
Why don't we invade Mexico then?
You think the United States doesn't do this?
No,
because
the United States
need
doesn't.
to.
But we absolutely could.
Are you seriously arguing that the United States doesn't influence Western Hemisphere countries?
See, this is where the difference in ideology becomes perfectly clear, because everyone on the Russian side of the argument is basically just believing that America is doing the same exact things, the same corrupt is basically the same corrupt system as Russia.
Well,
they intrinsically believe that.
Right. And it's a conflation of soft power with hard power situation.
Totally.
And this line becomes kind of the escape hatch for Nick for the entire rest of the debate. It's him saying, Destiny said America doesn't influence other countries. It's like, that's not what he said. He said America doesn't just strong arm other countries with their military force. They just say, you have to do what we're saying now because, you were going to have some favorable trade deal with some country we didn't like.
Yeah.
And even and I will admit that America has done things like that in the past. And I'm completely against any of that shit.
Yeah.
Even though it's 100% whataboutism. I think it is. I mean, obviously, it's never as simple as the communists make it. Like America, when the CIA was, just going around toppling Soviet countries. It's like, well, no, I mean, it's the same thing with Cuba. The problem wasn't just that, Cuba is going to become a Soviet country. The problem is that basically Cuba steals all of America's assets in the country that were there prior after the revolution. And that's the big issue there. But putting that aside, I would completely agree that like if Mexico decides it wants to become a communist country or something, that doesn't give us the right to invade Mexico. And I would be completely against that on that grounds. Just because they want to try some new economic system, even if it's at odds with our system.
Yeah, they should be able to.
Influence is way different than right now. We have drug issues. We've got cartel issues that exist on our southern border. If we wanted to, dude, we could bomb the fuck out of it. Hold on, no. If we're taking the realist perspective, if a country like Mexico existed on Russian borders, do you think that Russian would say, yeah, we understand a lot of illegal immigrants coming here. Yeah, we know a lot of it is ran by cartels, but, we're going to respect your sovereignty. We're going to let you guys forget it. Do you think that Russia would take the same position towards Mexico as the United States would? Absolutely not.
Let me just...
If we invaded Mexico, do you think Russia would perceive that as a provocation? I kind of think they might.
Well, they would if they had some, if they had some relationship with Mexico, or if Mexico was like seeking out ties with Russia or something, then. But
it would send a huge message that America's playing by completely different rules now.
It would. I mean, you're right in that regard. It would definitely make everyone in the rest of the world completely afraid.
Yes.
They'd be like, wait, what the fuck? America just invaded Mexico?
Yeah. NATO would be giant.
Holy shit.
America would be kicked out of NATO and NATO would be giant. They'd be
right,
like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
Shit.
America gets kicked out of NATO. You're right. But it's funny because he asked Nick this question, because I feel like Nick's real answer, which he wouldn't give in this debate, would be, that's why I like Russia, because Russia would invade Mexico and would tell them to fucking stop it. And that America's just being a pussy by not.
That's what is the weird thing here, because it's the argument that they're kind of making is that America did it, so Russia has every right to do it. When we're making the argument, America didn't have the right to do it, and two rights don't make a wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just get this clear. Your position is that in an analogous way, in the sense that Russia influences Belarus and Ukraine, you're saying that the United States in that same way does not influence
Canada and Mexico?
Absolutely. Countries in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, I mean, like in South America, especially through the Cold War, yeah, you could probably make arguments for that.
I'm talking about today.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Will we recognize and support? Well, here, I'm curious. Like, educate me. I don't know much about South American history. What are like breakaway states that the United States has recognized and sent paramilitary groups to in order to defend these states? Where we shipped off tons of U.S. passports, where we've shipped off U.S. citizens in order to Americanize these places? Like, where has this happened in South America since the year 1991? That's comparable to what Russia has done in Georgia, in Transnistria, in Ukraine. Like, where are these things happening?
Did you read about that? The Russians sending like thousands of passports to so that they could vote in the Russian election.
Yep.
That's so fucking shady.
Well, that's why
Can you imagine? Like Trump sends or Biden sends a bunch of passports to Mexico so that they can vote in the fucking next election. Oh, but we're just as corrupt as Russia,
Right.
okay? America is just as corrupt as Russia. Shut up, you guys. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, when the Democratic Party sent millions of passports to Mexicans in Mexico. Yeah, I know.
If the Democrats could do that, though, they
of course
probably
they
would.
can get away
Thank
with it.
goodness we have institutions that stand
Right.
in the way of that.
Exactly.
I mean, listen, if you're arguing that there's no Western influence in the Western Hemisphere,
I didn't
the
argue
debate
that
is
there's no
simply
Western
over.
influence.
Hang on. Don't interrupt me. I know. See, this is what you do.
Okay, see, this is where because if you remember the course of this conversation, okay, Destiny totally KO'd Nick on the the whole NATO argument's bullshit, because under the realism perspective, Russia would be doing exactly what it's doing regardless of whether NATO
Right.
was a force.
It's a bullshit excuse.
Right. And then Nick countered by saying, well, America is pushing this level of influence on its neighbors, which Destiny countered by saying they're influencing, but they're not influencing to the anywhere near the way you're sort of saying that Russia's influencing.
Strong arm. We're not using strong arm.
Right. And now, so now Nick is going to strawman Destiny for the entire rest of the conversation, saying Destiny's saying the U.S. doesn't influence other countries.
Right.
He's going to hide in sort of the vagueness of the definition of influence, and he's not going to allow that what exactly is being discussed here about influence to be, clearly stated by either side.
Bad Faith Barry just got off the bus.
Right.
Well, you're not answering, but go ahead. Yeah, I'll let you talk.
See, this is what you do. This is what you do.
This is what you
We're
do.
talking about a fundamental assertion here, which is how great powers act. And the fundamental assertion is, the United States influences weaker states. And then you get into, educate me about the history. You're not answering the question. You're not answering. I'm interrupting you. It's like, if your assertion, I don't need to back that up. I refuse to do it. I refuse to back it up because it's.
I refuse. I should just add this article. So listen, Sargon. I refuse to back my assertion up. Fuck you.
Preposterous to suggest that the United States does not influence weaker states in the
I never
Western
said they didn't.
Hemisphere
I never said
or
that.
elsewhere in the world. Absolutely, they do.
Of course they do. Yeah.